Alrighty, well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for being with us. It is a beautiful day here in Rock Hill. We have a little bit of a breeze going out here, but blue skies, and we are about 3 miles south of the runway at Rock Hill Airport, and the private pilots are out practicing today. So every couple of minutes they go by, maybe you'll hear them enjoying the freedom of the skies. What I wanted to expand upon today, there was a couple things. It's funny how things work for me, but as I prepare for talks and as I kind of allow the talk to unfold through me, and I listen to it. I sit and I listen. We start with the treatment. Spirit, what is it that you want to say today? What is it that you're going to say through me today? And sometimes I don't quite fully get the message that has passed through for a week or so, and then all of a sudden I have this aha experience. I go, wow, that's a pretty powerful idea. And then I remember, well, that's an idea that unfolded in a talk that was given a couple weeks ago. so it's like we are all learning, and I am learning, and these ideas that come through are kind of passing through, but they continue to develop. We grow deeper in our understanding. And I wanted to share with you kind of a combination of things that have occurred that we talked about over the last several weeks, and to bring them together to maybe a slightly different point. Emmett Fox talked about 7 main aspects of God, and he said there are many different aspects of God, but there are 7 main ones, and the others are combinations of the main ones. So, for example, 2 of the main aspects of God are wisdom and power. So the divine mind, as we think about it, remember it's just one, it's not divided into 7 pieces, but 7 was a number of completion in the Aramaic culture. So things tended to have 7s. So 2 of the main aspects, as defined by Dr. Emmett Fox, are wisdom and power. And what Dr. Fox tells us is that when you combine those 2 together, we call it poise. Poise is perfect power and perfect wisdom joined together. So we take 2 things and we combine them together, and we see a third, and then we go and explore the third, and that's how we continue to learn and grow. So a few weeks ago we were talking about love. In the month of February we were talking about love. And there's one definition of love that Dr. Holmes gives in the textbook, and as I mentioned, it tends to bring up discussion. People say, well, what did he mean by that? What did he mean by this? And I want to read it again because we're going to expand on it today in a slightly different light. He said, love is the self-givingness of spirit. Keep that in mind, self-givingness. That's the title of today's talk, the self-givingness of spirit, through the desire of life, with a capital L, life. Now, whenever you see a word in Science Mind textbook and in the writings of Emma Curtis Hopkins and people like that, whenever they take a word and they capitalize it, a word that's not usually capitalized, they're meaning it to represent God. Right? Life as God. God is all life. So love is the self-givingness of the Spirit, with a capital S, Spirit, through the desire of life, with a capital L, to express itself, with a capital I, in terms of creation. Love is the self-givingness of the Spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. And I think that's a very interesting definition of love, because we talk about love in human terms as an emotion, as a feeling, as a sentiment. Perhaps, love is just a bond that we have in society, but it's really at that level, at the cultural level, it doesn't go much further than that. And then we talked a little bit more about Osho's definition of love, and I don't think he claims it as being original, but it's one that I read in his works. And he said, love is the experience of unity, the experience of oneness. that which we feel one with, that's what we say we love. We have this idea of unity, but not just a knowledge of unity, the experience of unity. And that is what we recognize as love. And Dr. Holmes tells us that love is the self-givingness of the Spirit through the desire of life to express itself through the creative process, through creation. Self-givingness of Spirit. How do we look at all these things? How do we bring them together? And what came to my mind as these things were kind of working through me and working on me is this idea of fulfillment. Fulfillment. Now fulfillment, the definition of fulfillment that we get in the dictionary is a satisfaction or happiness that comes from achieving our full capability. We're fully developing our abilities and our character. Fulfillment is satisfaction. So we talked about love, and then we talked last week about faith. And we recognize that faith is kind of the mold. Faith is kind of the mold that creates in our lives the circumstances that the law of mind will create. So again, Dr. Holmes gives us the example of a mold in an iron factory, and they heat the steel up in the big vats. You've seen them, I'm sure, on Discovery Channel and places like that. These huge vats of molten steel, and then they pour them into a mold. Perhaps a mold of an I-beam to be used in construction of a skyscraper, or in the mold of a rail for a railroad track, something like that. But you get the idea. It's like pouring Jell-O into a mold of some type of an animal for a kid's party, or pouring cake batter into a cake pan that's going to look like a teddy bear after you frost it. What Dr. Holmes is telling us is that the very stuff and substance of the universe, and remember, substance means to stand under, right? That which stands under, that which is the basis of the entire universe, is the energy of God. And it takes form as directed by our faith, by our thoughts, by our belief in our heart. It takes form. So we get this idea of a very plastic and malleable universe. Stuff is coming into form. It exists in time and space. It dissolves back into energy. On the grand scale of the cosmos, we look at the black holes and we see the stuff and substance, the matter of the universe is all being attracted back into a black hole somewhere. And it goes into that black hole and it shoots back out as energy. And then that energy goes and it reforms. It takes different form, different shape, different size. It exists in a different time and different space. And then it goes back and it becomes recycled as energy. So we can see that. If you can, please go to the web and look at the pictures from the Hubble telescope. They had one compilation picture that they published a week or so ago, and it's just incredible, kind of looking out at this picture and then trying to gather some perspective as to size. How big is what we were looking at, And it's impossible for the human mind to grasp that. It is impossible for the human mind to understand something that is so big that it takes light, 15 billion years to get from one side to the middle, and then 15 billion years to get to the other side. We don't know what that is. We have nothing to compare it to. Human life is, if it's 100 years, it's a long one. What is 15 billion years? if we were to begin a journey to the nearest stars, at the speeds that we're currently capable of traveling, we wouldn't make it. Our children wouldn't make it. If we had children born on the spaceship, their children wouldn't make it. Generations would go by before a human being ever got that far out into space. We can't comprehend that. But such is the order of magnitude of the creative process. Remember, love is the self-givingness of spirit through the creative process. And in our lives, what controls that creative process is our faith. And then we said that one of the things that we can do to help ourselves deliberately develop faith along a particular line is to recognize that we belong. See, we belong. We feel part of it. We don't feel excluded from it. We don't feel victimized by life. But we feel that we are an integral part of life, that life is giving of itself through us. Life is giving of itself to us. That life with a capital L created us out of itself, out of its desire to express itself through the creative process. So if you just graduated high school and there was a sign that there was going to be a big party and it said all graduates are welcome, and you just graduated high school, you would know that you were included. You would say, well, I just graduated high school. I'm included. I can go to that party. We'd feel like we belong, We wouldn't hesitate for a minute going in and getting a bite to eat, getting a cool drink, listening to the music, dancing a dance, doing whatever people do at parties, because it's for us, you see. We belong, and we feel like we belong. And we have to come to this realization that we belong in this universe, in this place, at this time, in these bodies. We belong. We belong because we are part of life, and life is fulfilling itself. It is developing, it's developing us, it is developing its creation to the best of its ability. So we want to contemplate those ideas a little bit more today, because what I realized is if we truly understand that we belong, and if we truly understand that it is the nature of God to give because it is in the self-givingness that God fulfills itself, we truly understand that we are part of that, life becomes a whole lot easier. And we stand a much better chance of fulfilling our potential, of developing our abilities, of developing our character, which is to realize the presence of the divine. Now, realization is another definition for fulfillment. When we have realized, when we have completed, when we have realized, we have experienced the fruits of our labor, we are fulfilled. And the fruits of our labor, and I hate to call it labor, we have in the Bible, the yoke is sweet and the burden is life, and we really shouldn't think of our spiritual growth as something hard, that something that we need to struggle to do, that we have to force ourselves to fast, and we have to go without sleep and wear sackcloths and all of these kind of things that people have done over the years. But rather, let's think of our spiritual growth as Rumi tells us, or as the mystical Rumi tells us, we're like a moth being drawn to the flame. We have no choice. We are compelled by some inner desire. We are compelled to go towards it. And Rumi says if you put a glass, you know, the little hurricane lanterns, little hurricane glasses that you put over the candles to keep the wind from blowing them out, if you put a glass over the flame, the moth will just continue to beat and beat and beat against that glass, trying to unite with the flame. And if for some reason you remove that glass, even for just a short time, the moth would find its way into the flame for the experience of the bliss of being united. Even though the form of the moth as we know it ceases to exist, it has found its fulfillment, it has found its completion, it has realized its unity with the flame. And Rumi gives us that example of our spiritual growth. Instead of making our growth something that we need to struggle at and force ourselves to do, and all these things, if we realize that spirit is fulfilling itself as us by leading us back into the realization of itself, into the experience of unity with itself. That it is celebrating its creation, it is experiencing its creation in a unique and wonderful way as us. So let's talk a little bit about this word desire and how it fits into all of this. Love is the self-givingness of the Spirit through the desire of life to express itself through the creative process, spirit and desire. Think about that combination. Life has a desire. Now we have been taught, or we have heard perhaps in our society and in our culture that desire is not good. That desire leads us into diversion. Desire leads us away from God. And there's no doubt about it that it has, and it does. But because we have been told that, we have also come to the awareness of the teachings that tell us then that to eliminate all desire is bliss. And that too is true. To eliminate the human desire, to eliminate the ego desire. So if you think, for example, of the teachings of the Buddha, which I think kind of expresses this whole idea very eloquently, the human condition as we find it, as we awaken to it, is one of grasping and aversion. We are trying to get something, or we are trying to avoid something. And usually we are trying to avoid pain, and we are trying to get pleasure. Life is just that simple. At the base level, life is just that simple. And if you look at the way that public relations and propaganda tries to sway our opinion, tries to manipulate us, it's all very much at that level. You know, buy this product and you will be prettier and happier and smarter. Don't buy this product and people will laugh at you and all those kind of things. You have to keep up with the Joneses. You know, the person next door just bought a $50,000 pickup truck. You need to buy one too. Those kind of things. Grasping and aversion. Grasping and aversion. And we don't want to condemn that. We don't want to not understand its purpose. You know, it's natural. It's normal. It's natural. When we awaken to life, that's where we find ourselves. But what we tend to do is we equate fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness. We equate that with getting something from out there and bringing it into our experience. And Michael Beckworth called that fulfillment, and I don't know whether he invented the term or he borrowed it. Fulfillment. We are seeking fulfillment. We are seeking the total satisfaction of the full development of our abilities and our character, the realization of our spiritual nature. And yet what we are trying to do is we are trying to fill ourselves. We are trying to reach out and fill ourselves. If I just get this particular type of car, I'm going to be happy. If I get this particular house, I'm going to be happy. If I get to marry this particular person, I'll be happy. If I get this job, I'll be happy. If I make twice as much money, I will be happy. And all of these things that we in our human experience, in the human condition, we tend to think, we tend to desire, we want to have those things. And what happens is we get them to some degree, we get them. And of course, within that is the aversion, right? And if I avoid paying taxes, if I avoid suffering the consequences of my actions, if I avoid all of the unpleasant things of life while bringing to myself the pleasant, the pleasurable, well, then I'll be happy. And what we tend to discover as we grow spiritually, now we don't always get this in one lifetime, right? We can look around and we can see that there are folks who aren't going to get this. They are not going to get this while they are here on this earth. And that is not for us to judge or condemn. It's just to say that we have to think in terms of eternity. We have to think in terms bigger than the span of one human life. So eventually we all get it. That's the important thing. Eventually we all get it. And we realize that the things that we chased after did not satisfy us. The more money we got, the more money we wanted. The more things we accumulated, the more things we wanted. And then we found that by getting the very thing that we chased after, it didn't bring us the fulfillment that we had hoped, but rather it became a source of suffering. And again, this is from Buddhism. This is what Buddhism teaches us. So now we have the thing, but what if we lose the thing? And now that we have the thing, is it enough, or do we need more? If I make $1 million a year, is that enough, or should I be making 2? And what about the person next to me who's making 3? Shouldn't I be making more than that person? You see this in the contract negotiations with the athletes. They're making $10, $20 million a year and $40 million a year. You think, my gosh, how much money can one person spend? What can they do with all that money? But if the person playing on the other team gets $10 million a year more than they do, then they want to raise, you see. So that which we chase after, the chasing never ends. The chasing never ends. The seeking never ends. And we are constantly going out there trying to find something to bring in here. So at some point in our spiritual growth, at some point we realize that all of that is emptiness. All of that is nothing. And we find out what it is that we were truly seeking. What we were truly seeking is not out there, but it is in here. And it is the experience of the presence of God. Then we begin our spiritual growth in earnest. Then we turn and we go within, and instead of looking out there, we start to wonder, who is it that is looking? What is it that is looking? So we've been taught, or we've heard, that the end goal is the absence of all desire. And we wonder, how do we get from here to there? And sometimes we misunderstand, and we think we can go through life just saying, well, I don't want anything. But do we want God? Do we want the experience of God? Do we want the experience of no desire? And isn't the desire to not have any desires also a desire? So if all desires are bad desires, or all desires are distractions, and all desires are misleading, then what of the desire to experience the presence of God? So we have to come to an understanding here that this is what is meant by walking the razor's edge. This is walking the razor's edge. We have a desire to end the desires that lead us away from God. We have a desire to end the grasping and the aversion. We have a desire to simply be at home with the one who sent us. And that is still a good desire. That is still a desire, and it is a good desire. But when we achieve, or experience is perhaps a better word, when we experience liberation, when we experience realization, when we experience the Christ consciousness, well, then that desire too will go away, because we will be fulfilled. We will have that very thing that we desire. So we want to understand then that desire plays an important role in our development, and it can play a good role or a not so good role, if you want to use terms of good and less good, for example. Our desires can lead us into distraction. They can lead us to wander off into the far land like the prodigal son, but they can also awaken within us the realization of who and what we are and lead us back home. Life has a desire to express itself through the creative process. Life has a desire. Look at that definition again. Love is the self-givingness of the Spirit through the desire of life to express itself. Life has desires. We have a desire to eat. We call it our appetite. And that desire causes us to do something that is good for our growth, to eat. Now, what we choose to eat and how much of it we choose to eat, that is up to us. And we can eat the wrong things, and we can eat too much, or we can eat too little. But the desire to eat is a desire that serves as a motive force that puts us into movement to go do something that is good for us. The desire to drink, thirst, is a desire that causes us to go and do that which is good for us. Now we can choose to drink things that are good for us or things that are not good for us. We can choose to drink too much or to drink too little. But the desire itself is there to serve as a motivational force, a motive force, to get us to move in the right direction. And the desire to know God, we didn't place in our hearts. I think it was Thomas Aquinas who said we wouldn't even have the desire to pray if God had not first put it in our hearts. There is something that has created us out of itself, and it has left that desire to be one with it, to know it, to realize it. That desire is within us, and that desire causes us to seek it. So we recognize then that not all desires lead us astray, and that desire in itself is neither good nor evil. But there is something within us that is calling us home. We also have to come to some understanding of who is the us, who am I? What is this ego thing that we are talking about? Because again, we know that this ego I is a source of some confusion, and eventually it too dissolves. It too goes away. But not to the point of oblivion, but to the point of transformation, of transcension. to the point of an I separate from the divine, separate from each and every other person, that concept of I dissolves. And there's the unification with the I am. So now we come to this idea then of spirit fulfilling itself. And we start to come to a realization that what we are really trying to do, what we have been trying to do, no matter where we've gone and looked for it, no matter how much we've allowed ourselves to be distracted along the way, that what we have been doing is we have been trying to find our place as God's instrument of fulfilling itself as us. Now again, this is very interesting because we think that to ourselves intellectually God is all that there is. God already has everything that there is. Everything that there ever was, everything that there ever will be. God can lack nothing. So then how can God need fulfillment? And the key word there is need. Need. You and I think of the creative process as fulfilling a need, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. You remember learning that as a kid over and over and over again. Necessity is the mother of invention. There was a need that came along and somebody invented something and they filled that need. And that's what we were taught as children. That's what we were taught even as young adults in school. Right? But that's only one part of the creative process. And usually that's taking something that was discovered in another way and then finding a practical use for it. You might remember a few months ago I was talking about Edison, and everybody recognizes Thomas Edison as a great inventor. And I won't take that away from him. He was. But a lot of the things that Thomas Edison invented, somebody else had discovered. But Edison found a practical way to put them to use. Other people were working on light bulbs at the same time that Edison was. Edison found a way to make the light bulb last longer. Edison found a way to generate the electricity that would power the light bulb and built substations and built transmission wires and all those things. He made it practical. But there's also another source of discovery, and it's play, and it's imagination. Remember, and if you like the quotes of Einstein, there's one that goes around from Einstein that said, his greatest discoveries came from imagination, playful imagination. He came to the theory of relativity by imagining what it would be like to sit on the end of a light beam as it came out of a flashlight. What would happen if we were traveling along at the speed of light with the end of that beam of light? What would that be like? And that helped him to see the world in a different way, to see the universe in a different way. So spirit does not need, God does not need, and God does not invent or create out of necessity. But it creates out of a desire to be playful, to express itself, to give of itself. It cannot receive. It has everything. It can only give. Well, what can it give to? And that is us. See, that is us. Now, in some of the traditions of Jewish mysticism, and I realize that there's lots of different things that you'll read that tell you it came from Jewish mysticism. One that I had studied gave the story or the mythology that when spirit began the creative process, it wanted to give. It had everything, it could receive nothing, and it wanted to give. It had a desire to give, but to whom, to what to give? So its first act of creation was to create something that could receive, and that was the soul, an individualized expression of itself, a vessel. Soul, one definition of the soul might be a vessel that was capable of receiving that which the divine wanted to give. But the souls were in close proximity to the divine. And the souls tried to empty themselves out. They tried to just eliminate everything they had so that they could then be that vessel through which the Spirit could fulfill them. But because they were in such close proximity to God, they were still, I don't know how to say it, still in heaven, still in this other realm, if you want to consider it that they couldn't empty themselves out fast enough, because as fast as they could empty themselves out, God could resupply them, refulfill them. And they broke. The vessels broke. Now again, this is mythology. This is a story of kind of explaining who we are and why we're here. So the first act of creation didn't go so well. The vessels broke. Didn't work out too well. So the vessel said, in order for us to be the instruments of receiving the good that God wants to give, we are going to have to undergo an experience of separation. We're going to have to undergo the appearances of separation. We're going to have to leave the garden. We're going to have to leave the Garden of Eden. We're going to have to experience banishment, kind of the separation. And we're going to have to go into an experience where it appears that we are separated. And we're going to have to experience the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. We're going to have these experiences along the way so that the divine can fill us. And we're going to have to rediscover our way back home. We're going to have to rediscover our way back into the garden. We're going to have to move through the two cherubim that guard the gate, fear and desire. We're going to have to move past those and come back into the fullness of the experience of the presence of God. But when we come back home, see, we will be unique. We will be unique, individualized expressions of the divine. And I think that story, that teaching story, that parable, that mythology, probably gives us a good idea of what it is that we are doing here. The divine is rediscovering itself through each and every one of us uniquely. Each and every one of us sees the world uniquely, experiences the world uniquely. We hear different sounds, we see different colors, we feel different textures. We are each that unique, individualized expression of God. The divine is creating through us according to our faith. It is giving of itself, the self-givingness of spirit through the creative process. And it uses us as co-creators. It uses us as unique, individualized starting places where each and every one of us can go into life and create something different, something new, something playful, something to express. You see, this idea of creating out of playfulness is an idea of self-expression. Children go out to play in the yard, and they don't go out to solve a problem. They go out to play, and it comes spontaneously. And they decide what it is that they will do and how they will play. Have great adventures on the little treehouse out in the yard. Spirit creates out of this self-expression, perhaps that we call playfulness, out of joy, out of delight at experiencing itself anew through us and as us. And now we start to come into this sense of understanding why it is that we belong. Why it is that we belong why it is that we should have faith, why it is that we should use the faith that we have for very deliberate purposes. Because God created us to do so. And then what is it that we should use? Our ability to co-create. What is it that we should use? Our ability to develop a specific faith for a specific reason. What is it that we should do? Well, should we do it to grasp more things? Should we do it to avert more things? Should we just become better human beings? Goldsmith talks about this. When we first come into our spiritual realization, we try to bring God into our human experiences to make our human experiences better. We're trying to use God. And what we must come to realize is that no, we're not here for the purpose of using this awareness of our spiritual nature for the purpose of more grasping and more aversion, but for the purpose of self-expression. How does this thing that I desire allow God to express itself more fully through me and as me? That's the question we should be asking. Ernest Holmes said if we wanted to check our desires, remember I said all desire is not bad? The desire to know God is a good desire. The desire to have no desires is a good desire, yet it is still a desire. And Ernest Holmes tells us to check the desires that we have and to ask ourselves these simple questions. Does this thing that I desire bring into expression a greater experience of life or love or truth or beauty? Is it giving a greater expression to the very nature of God? And if we answer yes to at least one of those things, then we say, does this thing I desire harm anyone or attempt to take anything away from anyone? So if the thing that I desire gives a greater expression to the very nature of God, and it doesn't harm anyone, it doesn't steal from anyone, then do it. Then go for it. Because it is a good desire of the divine trying to express itself through us and as us for the purpose of experiencing itself through us and as us. So today we come into, I hope, a deeper realization, a deeper awareness, a deeper understanding, but most importantly, a deeper feeling, a feeling in the heart, the aha of knowing that love is the self-givingness of the Spirit through the creative process. It is in that process, it is one with everything, and love is the experience of this oneness. And it is through the creative process that Spirit is fulfilling itself. It is fully developing its abilities and its character. That we have entered into a temporary situation in the appearance of separation so that we could be able to empty ourselves out and allow ourselves to be refilled in some unique and wonderful way, according to our faith, according to our belief. So as we go out this week, as you experience life this week, I invite you to go with a sense of awe and wonder and adventure, as a small child might go out into the world. You know, I just love watching the children. Everything to them is amazing. You know, the breeze on their face of a toddler is amazing. They have to stop and play with it and wrinkle their nose and take a deep breath. Experience everything in life this week as it was the first time that you had ever experienced it, because you are experiencing it not with your human ego, not with your human desires of grasping and aversion, but with the awareness of your spiritual nature that God is discovering itself anew as you. That you are that instrument that has been created so that spirit might play, might experience joy, might fulfill itself. Let go of every and any idea of grasping or averting. Latch on to every and any idea of expressing and fulfilling. Let's look in awe. Let's look in wonder at the magnificence of what God is being as each and every one of us. And as we do so, the sense of struggle that we had when we perceived ourselves to be only human disappears. The sense of belonging in the universe that God has created, expands. We go do the things that give a greater expression to life without harming anyone. And we expect that everything that is appropriate has been provided and appears on time. So let's start to live our lives today more fully as the children of God. That is, the expressions of God, the individualized expression of the divine life, here and now, as us. And let's see what difference it makes in the feeling of love that we experience as we grow deeper and deeper into the realization of our oneness with each other and with the presence and the activity of God. And so it is.